The journey of a male survivor of trauma is often complex and challenging, with many facing unique obstacles that can make recovery and healing difficult. One of the most significant challenges is the stigma and the societal expectations around masculinity, which can make it harder for male survivors to disclose their experiences and seek help. This can lead to feelings of isolation and shame, further complicating the healing process. However, there are many societal interactions and support systems that can aid male recovery and survivor recovery. It is important to explore and identify these in order to provide better support and resources for those that have experienced trauma. In this discussion, we will go deeper into the barriers that hinder disclosure and the social interactions that both harm and aid male survivors in recovery and healing. It is absolutely wonderful to welcome two incredible individuals who have had a big impact on my life today. And I welcome them here to this talk. Dr. Glenn Miles is a senior researcher with UP International, and for 25 years he's led INGOs and facilitated research listening to survivors of sexual exploitation, including men and women and boys and girls, as well as transgendered people, as well as researching those that have been sex buyers. Glenn teaches graduate and PhD candidates and provides supervision and advises the Butterfly Longitudinal Project, CHAD-DI. And Dr. Glenn Miles was also on my thesis committee board and a co-writer with the latest research on familial trafficking of boys. And my name is Ana Lucia Mariaca Pacheco, and I am a trauma-informed professional in human security with a master's specialization in male survivors of child sexual abuse and human trafficking for sexual exploitation. I've worked with the Government of Canada, NGOs, law enforcement, and international organizations on anti-trafficking, advocacy work, database, casework, and global projects. I'm also a member of the Global Association of Human Trafficking Scholars and the author of The Needs and Stories of Male Survivors of Child Sexual Abuse, Exploitation, and Human Trafficking. So big thank you to Dr. Glenn Miles and Jeffrey Tennant for being here with me today as we talk about human trafficking, healing, post-traumatic growth for male survivors.
And allow me to ask a few questions. I don't know whether we will be able to answer all of them today, but still I want to tell you that seeing the interest of speakers, seeing the interest also of attendance, I definitely think we should start a series of webinars with you, Anna, and with survivors, because we want to include you in this series of webinars. So allow me to ask a first question. What can faith-based organizations do to improve our response and support mechanisms for victims? Or possibly, are there any gaps in researching victims and survivors of sexual abuse and exploitation that we need to draw more attention to? And I think especially when we think of family trafficking, trafficking within the family, which is of course very difficult, but how can we research this and provide for prevention and rehabilitation? And then also another thing, how can we address the lifelong ramifications of traumas? Because we heard Jeffrey speaking about PTSD and discovering what PTSD was for him many years after this traumatic experience. And then another question I would like to ask is, how could not only writing books such as Jeffrey did, but composing and playing music as well as painting serve as creative outlets in the recovery process? And then another question, how could we promote an interdisciplinary approach in research, training, and recovery? And then allow me two more quick questions. How can prevention be more direct? Not only posters, but face-to-face conversations. And the last one, but that will be, of course, possibly a different topic. How could we best support victims and survivors to pursue justice through criminal and civil claims, criminal prosecution and civil claims? That's it. But you see, so many issues are coming. And I must say, I'm very glad to see Glenn, Dr. Glenn Miles, very happy to see you live. And many thanks for your contributions.
Great to be here.
Yes. Okay. And now, back to you. But thanks again. It's very impressive. And I think what also if there is one word we could keep, hope. Go ahead. Up to you.
So thank you so much, Michael, for starting that off. And it's such a pleasure to see you, Glenn, again. So I'll go ahead and start off these questions. And Glenn, feel free to jump in after and give us your answer as well. So faith-based organizations can play a critical role in improving the response and supporting mechanisms for survivors and victims of child sexual abuse and human trafficking. Some of these examples can include education and awareness, prevention programs, supporting victims after their trauma, collaborating with other organizations, and advocating for policy change. So faith-based organizations can provide education and awareness training on the issues to their members of their communities. This can include trainings on recognizing the signs of abuse and trafficking, as well as how to respond to a disclosure afterwards. They can also implement prevention programs by promoting healthy relationships, boundaries, safe practices to reduce the risk of abuse and trafficking, and how to properly do consent, respectful relationships, and even safe internet use. They can also provide support for victims. This can include counseling, support for legal services and medical care, as well as connecting survivors that have similar experiences. These faith-based organizations can collaborate with other organizations such as law enforcement, social services, and community organizations to coordinate a joint response together. And then they can also influence and advocate for policy change and improve the response for child sexual abuse and exploitation through trafficking by supporting legislation, strengthening protection services, and advocating for increase of funding for support services. Glenn, do you have any additions to the answer for this question?
I think one thing that's worth saying is that faith-based organizations haven't always commanded much respect amongst secular organizations. Mm-hmm. They've tended to feel that they're not really, they're just doing the fluffy stuff around the edges, and they're not taking things seriously and involved in policy and involved in, seriously caring for people. There's some big concerns about the way that we look after victims, that we are forced, basically we're forcing them to believe things and so on, rather than seeing it actually spirituality as an integral part of what we of holistic care of people. So I think that's something we need to get over by proving to other organizations that we're up to the mark, and that we can do this as well as anybody. But that can take some time. But I do think it's important that we are aware of that, and that we're not afraid to say this is who we are, and actually provide evidence in, for example, spirituality being a benefit rather than something that's seen as inherently negative. We've done some research with the Butterfly Longitudinal Research Project in Cambodia that demonstrated that the spiritual faith component of the care of victims was actually very powerful in providing support to people, and so it shouldn't be ignored, but it should conversely should be embraced. So I think that's really important. I know we've got lots of other questions, but I just wanted to add that.
Thank you very much, Glenn. So I'll continue on to the next answer. So about the gaps in researching for victims and survivors. So there are several gaps in researching this that need more attention. And for example, a couple of them are the experiences of marginalized groups. There's a lack of research on the experience of these groups, people with disabilities, LGBTQ plus individuals, indigenous communities, and there is a need for much more research and understanding their unique challenges and barriers faced by these groups in accessing support services, as well as what is their experience, just like we had done with male victims and survivors. Another one is the impact of technology. With the increased use of technology in our daily lives, we do need more research on what is this impact on victims and survivors, especially children. We should also look into the best practices for intervention and support. There is a need for this, and what is effective counseling and therapeutic approaches, and the best way to support services through the criminal justice system. And finally, a really important one would be prevention strategies and safeguarding practices. We need more information on what are the proper implementations for these. Research on effective prevention programs, as well as their impact on community level interventions, social norm change, as well as super important. And so there are several gaps that we need to look into. And Glenn, do you have any gaps that you would like looked into?
Yes, I mean, I think all of those things you said that's a very comprehensive list. I think just enabling us to do research with young men and boys is really important, and often the funding isn't available to do that. The assumption is that it's girls and women who have the who need us to do research with, when actually, of course, it's all human beings. I think I said that before, but it is worth reiterating that this is an important area that we need funding for. It's impossible. We at the moment, most of the funding that we've been involved in has been very small scale. We've only been able to do research with small groups of people because there hasn't been the funding available. So we need to find large scale funding to be able to do large scale comprehensive research.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very true. And it's so important to have this evidence-based research to bring forth in programming and projects internationally and locally, because that's where the real potential change can come in. So to answer Michael's next question on how can we address the lifelong ramifications of trauma, addressing these ramifications require a multifaceted approach that focuses both on prevention and intervention. And this can look at early intervention, which is very critical in understanding these lifelong ramifications of trauma. This could look into trauma-informed care as soon as possible, right after the abuse or the exploitation is disclosed or discovered. And this can really help survivors process their trauma and develop coping skills that would reduce long-term impacts. Having access to mental health services is also very critical. Evidence-based therapists that can help survivors manage their symptoms of trauma and help develop healthy coping mechanisms. Peer support can also be a very powerful tool in addressing this trauma, as well as providing services such as peer support, mentorship programs, and other forms of social support. As well as by addressing these barriers, we can help survivors build stable and fulfilling lives by providing them with, example, with education, vocational training programs, as well as supporting survivors in finding stable employment. And another point that I would like to bring up is advocating for policy change, as I had mentioned before, and increasing funding, as Glenn said, for these research projects for mental health services, for these safe homes, because we need to prioritize the needs and rights of survivors. And by providing early intervention, these support services, peer support, education and employment, policy changes, we can really help build more stable lives. However, we need to remember that these are people first with dreams of hope, of having a family, of getting an education, a job, and therefore we need to meet and support victims and survivors through their journey so that they can have this feeling that they're living again, not just stuck in their past and in their pain. Glenn, is there any other
just
things
one
you'd
other
like to add?
comment, which I think we've touched on before, is that really everybody who works with boys and men at any level need to have some training and understanding on trauma informed care. But actually, that we know that in resource scarce environment that's not always possible. But what we can do is to train people in good listening skills, and rather than giving advice, which may or may not be harmful, it's better for people to just learn that they need to have big ears and small mouths. That's a really important aspect of this.
Yes, and that's exactly what we had heard from Jeffrey, how important listening is, and being listened to, being believed, makes all the difference in that healing, in that journey to healing. And the next question that Michael had asked was about writing and composing music and other creative outlets in the recovery process. And so creative outlets such as writing books like Jeffrey did, composing music, playing music, painting, those are very valuable tools in the recovery process for those that feel very attached to this. Creative outlets allow for the expression of emotions in a safe and creative way. And this outlet allows to share your stories and express themselves as a way to empower and to heal. And I've also seen this done in third person, where someone writes themselves as a character, and this helps write the story without being directly connected to it as the author, and allows for a space for reflection while minimizing triggers at the same time. And this act of creating can be very therapeutic and give you a sense of control, agency, especially as that was taken away during trauma, during abuse and exploitation. And engaging in these activities can really help a survivor or victim gain a deeper understanding of their experience, help build self-esteem and confidence, especially when they see that their work is validated by the public, and the survivor can really feel a sense of pride and accomplishment in that. And these creative outlets really allow for survivors to connect with each other and with others, to provide a bigger sense of community and support, and build relationships, which is really key in that healing journey. Glenn, do you have anything that you would like to add to this?
Just a little bit more. I think getting out in nature is really important. I think people have understood that. They were understanding that more and more now. And also, of course, just walking and hiking and getting some kind of exercise can be is one of the things that's proven to be very helpful for people in dealing with depression and long-term mental health challenges. And the other thing that occurs to me as well is working with animals, having pets, getting alongside horses. I'm currently supervising someone who's working with children and working who themselves are interacting with horses, and just seeing how that impacts their spiritual lives. And I think these are things that we still don't know very much about, but we know from working with children that they boys and young men, that they would love to be around animals, and often it can be very healing for them.
Yeah, I've seen some of those in the United States. Those are very impactful and have a very big thing into healing. So the next question that Michael had asked is, how can we promote an interdisciplinary approach in research, training, and recovery? So promoting this in research, training, and recovery requires collaboration and communication across fields and disciplines. So researchers from different fields such as psychology, social work, law enforcement, and public health can work together on research projects, on programs to gain a more comprehensive understanding of the issues. This can include sharing data, collaborating on the studies, pooling resources, and conducting interdisciplinary research. Professionals working in these fields that are related to these topics, such as medical professionals, social workers, lawyers, can also receive training to better understand how to respond to it, such as joint training sessions that combine law enforcement, medical staff, social workers, can really help draw on these expertise, especially in collaborating of who do we contact next, who has these support services. And so by bringing everyone together, they now know who to contact and who has those services. And so by cross-sectional partnerships between government, NGOs, private sector entities, we can really help promote this interdisciplinary approach to address these issues. And partnerships can really help bring together the diverse perspectives and resources needed to create these really comprehensive solutions in more of a holistic way. And so, Glenn, do you have anything that you would like to add to this?
Yeah, again, I think one of the things that I can see more of at the moment is conferences where they have a variety of different sectors represented, where people can learn from each other and also network effectively. So that's always an important thing, rather than us just staying in our silos with our own professionals. To actually get out and connect with others is really key.
Mm-hmm. The next question Michael had said was, how can prevention be more direct, not just posters, but face-to-face conversation? So while posters and other forms of advertisements can be really effective in raising awareness, these conversations are a lot more powerful in preventing these crimes. And so, for example, schools and educators can incorporate these discussions on child sexual abuse and human trafficking into classrooms, into the lessons, and providing students with a safe space to learn and ask these questions. Teachers can invite experts in the field to speak to the students directly on these issues, raising more awareness both for the children and for adults. Community outreach such as churches, youth organizations, community centers can organize events by bringing community members together to discuss these issues. They can talk to experts, they can do workshops, interactive activities to help raise awareness for their communities, as well as learn about practical tools of prevention. And then professionals who work with children, such as teachers, doctors, social workers, can receive trainings on the signs of child sexual abuse and exploitation and what steps to take when they suspect that a child has been abused or exploited. And for example, in the research that was conducted through my thesis dissertation that both Glenn and Michael were on, we actually identified a lot of new indicators of how to visually see these signs in children, behavioral indicators, emotional indicators, psychological indicators. So it's very important to know what signs to look for. And finally, parents can receive training. They can talk to their children about child sexual abuse and trafficking prevention that is age appropriate, as well as teaching them boundaries. What is body autonomy? What are warning signs? To make sure that a safe adult doesn't make you keep a secret. And so these little tricks here and there can really help both teachers, parents, and adults protect children when faced with these situations. And Glenn, do you have any kind of prevention tools that you would highlight?
Yeah, I'm very happy to share with you a couple of flip books that we've used. So flip books are basically large books that can be used in classrooms or with small groups of children. I'm going to put it into the chat now, a couple of websites that you can check out. Basically, The Good Touch, Bad Touch is a story about 3 children, and we deliberately made sure that one of the children was a boy, so it normalizes the idea that sexual abuse of boys can happen as much as girls. And so that's available. It's been translated into a wide range of languages now, So if anybody's interested, then please do contact me, and we can see how we can help you use it and access the material. So I'll also put my email in case you haven't got it.
So that raises a very important point, Glenn, and I heard that a lot in the research itself. It's this need to be seen. As much as we want to say, you know, posters aren't the solution, but seeing yourself represented in these posters, in these advertisements, in these commercials, however people put these programs out there, it's really important to have that diverse representation, whether it's a girl, whether it's a boy, LGBTQ, whether it's a minority group, indigenous. We need to have representation of all of everyone, so that everyone can see themselves in that, knowing I can ask for support, I can tell my story, I'm able to disclose, and someone is there to listen to me. Because if they only see a little girl, then that really cuts out so many of our global population thinking, I can't ask for help, I can't get support because there isn't anything available. So thank you for bringing that up, Glenn, and that leads to our next question of how can we best support victims and survivors to pursue justice through criminal or civil claim. And so I would like to begin this by saying supporting victims and survivors of child sexual abuse and human trafficking to pursue justice really needs a comprehensive approach that takes into account their unique needs and challenges of each individual. It really needs to be tailored on how to support that survivor through the process. We need to provide emotional support. Pursuing justice can be a very emotionally taxing process for survivors, and it's very important to promote this emotional support throughout the entire process. And this can include accessing mental health services, support groups, or just knowing the triggers of the person that you're helping and knowing when to calm them back down and regroup when needed, or just when to stop the process entirely to let them feel those emotions and then get back to that process. We also need to educate survivors and victims on their rights. Many survivors are not even aware of their legal rights or the legal procedures or how to pursue justice. And it's really important to educate them on their legal options, on what resources they can take so they can have an informed decision. Survivors may need legal assistance to pursue these criminal and civil claims, such as filing police reports, finding a lawyer, navigating the legal system. So we really need to assist in just making that a little bit easier. And when addressing these logistical barriers by pursuing justice, this might involve traveling, court appearances, and other logistical challenges. And so it's really important to address these barriers by providing transportation, childcare, other forms of assistance, even social or emotional support during that process, as I had stated before. But policy change is really a big critical role in supporting these survivors, because we need to really change our laws, our regulations to just make it easier for survivors to seek justice, as well as increasing funding for victim services. And finally, I want to really make this a point that we need to hold perpetrators accountable. This is an essential part of the justice process. This can involve working with law enforcement to bring perpetrators to justice, supporting the survivors in pursuing these claims, but also believing the survivor if the perpetrator is someone that you won't really guess right away. This could be a female perpetrator. This could be their mother, their grandmother. This could be a teacher. This could be the Sunday school teacher. This could be the mayor. It could be anyone. And when we say, oh, it can't be them, it would never be them, that is because they have groomed not only the child or the person and the family, but they've also groomed the community to make them believe that, to the point where, okay, I will commit this offense against this child, against this person, and the community around me will back me thinking, oh, I could have never, or they would turn a blind eye. And so we really need to hold perpetrators accountable in order to have any kind of next step that holds any justice for survivors. And Glenn, would you like to mention something as well in this?
I think just in terms of the the court system and so on. There's often, it's particularly in developing world, there's a need for the court system to be more child friendly, and for example, having being able to use videos in court rather than children where they're exposed to the perpetrator in court is too overwhelming. So things like that, we just need to continue to work on trying to get justice done in a way which is not intimidating but is careful and child friendly.
Yes, exactly. And I remember speaking with a lot of survivors, and then during my trainings that I do with law enforcement, it's this question around interviewing the survivor. A lot of the times it happens over and over and over again. And to have a trauma-informed interviewing techniques, it's to make sure that they know the next steps, that you're with them throughout the entire thing. But also it's really important to get those audio and visuals immediately so that they're not constantly retelling their traumatic stories. And then when you do go on, you're not asking the same questions. You're building off those previous questions to get all the information needed for those court and judicial proceedings later on. Because if we just keep re-traumatizing the victim, then how are we any better than their exploiter?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Anna, Glenn, and special thanks to Jeffrey Tennant. I greatly appreciate your willingness to share your story with us today, and your courage and hope are truly inspiring for helpers, victims, and survivors alike. And allow me to make 3 brief quotes of the 3 speakers. First, Jeffrey, it won't be a dark side. It will be full of hope, because when you just been able to walk through the valley of the shadow of death, and you begin to fear no evil, because God really is with you. This is the greatest comfort and strength we could ever have in our lives. And now, Glenn, allow to quote from you. I love that Jeffrey has spoken so much about the word hope. It can often feel like an era which is so dark and hopeless. I just love that we can end this with that sense of real hope, that there is hope.
Thank you.
And now, finding a safe and trusted individual to share your story will help lift the burden that you've been carrying for all these years. You do not want to feel trapped in a jail cell within your own body. Just find 1, 2 people that you trust and that will really help your soul. Finally, if you have symptoms of abuse or exploitation, it's really important to address those. Don't minimize your story to yourself. Let yourself feel, let yourself heal. This will be a journey, a long one, but there is healing and there is hope. End of quote. And now, in concluding this webinar, I would like to express my gratitude also to Yves Reichenbach, who is next to me, Emanuele Piluso, and Lindsay Boudreau for their contributions. And in a few days, you shall find the video recording of this webinar with subtitles in 7 languages on our website, as well as Vimeo and YouTube. And thank you for being with us, supporting our efforts, as well as helping survivors. And we hope to see you at our next webinar on Tuesday, the 27th of June, at 6 p.m. Central European Summer Time, with Anna explaining her 5-year-long research on male survivors and a male survivors live. You can already register, and I hope it will be part of the start of a series, because definitely we need to include survivors in our webinars. We need to include them, and we can feel that it's also helping them, helping other survivors, and helping other people who are trying to to take care of them. But please, Anna and Glenn, would you have a final word on this? Up to you.
I love the word hope, and I think we need to dig into it more. I think it's a beautiful word.
Okay, Anna.
Thank you so much, Michael, for this opportunity to share my research and my work and my passion with your audience. Thank you as well to your organizing team for logistics. They're absolutely incredible. Thank you very much. Thank you, Glenn, for being a part of this journey and this process. Both of you have been so impactful in not only my journey, but in my research, making sure that it's trauma-informed, that it's victim-centric, that we're always putting the survivor at the core of why we do all of this. And so thank you, everyone, for listening. And I cannot wait to see you all again in the many series that we have in the future.